It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by CartKing.com. That's 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile, retail, coffee, and food carts and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. So you go to the website, cart-king.com. You look at their different models, their designs. You pick out the one that applies to you. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, and ship it worldwide. 877-986-7771. Okay, I'm really excited about today's show. We have with us Roxanne Salch Kaplan, and she's the wife of the widow of Dr. Stephen Kaplan. They wrote the book together, The Amityville Horror Conspiracy, and they got a Facebook page now. She has a Facebook page now called The Amityville Horror Conspiracy. Roxanne, are you there?
Yes, hi, Ed. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you tell us about yourself? Who is Roxanne Salch Kaplan?
I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I met my late husband in 1974 when he was giving lectures on the paranormal, parapsychology, and strange phenomena. And I attended those lectures and ended up joining the parapsychology research group that we had on Long Island at the time.
So you've always been interested in the paranormal, and I guess you call it
Yes.
ghost busting?
From the time I was a child, I was a big fan of the Gothic soap opera Dark Shadows, and that really got me interested in the whole thing with parapsychology and ESP and ghosts and things like that. It was very big at the time, with the Ouija boards. As kids, we all played with Ouija boards, and we had books, the Universe Book Club, where I would get books on all these different paranormal phenomena, and so I had a strong interest in it. And when I heard about the local lectures in 1974, I decided to go check it out, and that was where I met my future husband-to-be.
Have you ever had any bad experiences dabbling in all this kind of stuff?
Oh, yes, we have.
Can you describe some?
There was one time when a satanic cult on Long Island had somebody call us up and tell us that she needed a haunted barn investigated. But when we got there, we found out that we were actually being recruited to be sacrifices for the satanic cult. And the woman who had called us chickened out and decided to tell us what was going on, and we barely escaped out of that place. So that was one. And there was another time when there was a very famous missing child case in New York called the Aton Pates case,
right,
where a 6-year-old disappeared from the village in the city, and we were called in to try to use our psychics to investigate, where this child was, if he could be found, which he never was found, actually. And because we were involved in that case, we got people calling us claiming they had information on the Aton Bates case and knew who might be involved in a murder of the child. And because of that, we had to call in the detective on the case and tell him the information that we knew. And when we did that, the person that they picked up, they interviewed him and then let him go, and then he proceeded to make death threats against us for a while.
I interviewed a retired police officer, Mike Cadella, who worked on the Aton Pates case as well. And he had the theory that there was a satanic cult involved in that case as well, as did Maury Terry. A cult called
It's possible, but I believe it was more like a child trafficking ring back then, because the person who spoke to us on the phone would talk about chicken, which was referred to, people that like young boys, and that there was this bar down in the city that they all used to hang out, and this person who claimed he had the information about it was a patron of that bar. After we kept getting threats from the person for years, my husband decided to take it upon himself to go to the actual bar and tell the manager that if any of his clientele used the phone in the bar to harass us and threaten us again, that he would come down and rip the phone out of the wall, and that pretty much put an end to it.
Yeah, somehow that's how you have to handle it. Sometimes, you just got to go down and threaten to rip the phone out of the wall. Hey, but the cult that was trying to set you up, was this called the Process Church? Do you know the name of that cult?
No, it was no specific church.
Okay.
It was just a group of people, and believe it or not, they met because the leader of the cult was a Boy Scout leader, and he recruited people, the parents of the boys that he was leading in the Boy Scouts to join his satanic cult.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Okay.
Yeah.
You got some stories. We were talking about your book. It's kind of out of print. You should write another book. You should write another book.
Yeah, I really should.
Yeah.
I really should. Or maybe just reissue this one in a new edition.
Yeah, this is some good stuff. Now, how did you get involved with the Amityville horror?
Okay, so between 74 and 76, we were conducting all kinds of investigations of ghosts and haunted houses on Long Island, and we were listed in this local phone book in the Yellow Pages, if anybody remembers the Yellow Pages back then. And so if anybody had a problem, they would find us in the Yellow Pages, or they would hear Stephen on a radio program or such, and they would call and tell us that they needed our help. So we were well known for that in those couple of years there. And in 1976, we saw an article in the paper about the house where these terrible murders had been committed a couple of years before that. The DeFeo family, the mother, the father, the two daughters, and the two sons were all killed, and the oldest son, the fifth child, was in jail for it. And then this family came along after the house had been vacant for a while, and this family called George and Kathy Lutz bought the house for a very inexpensive price and claimed that they moved out 24 days later, fleeing for their lives because of all of the demons and the terrible things that were going on in the house. So there was a brief article in the Newsday on Long Island, the Newsday paper, about this claim that they were making, and Newsday called up my husband, since he was a local expert on parapsychology, to ask him what he thought about it. And he was quoted in the article as saying, well, I really can't make a comment as I haven't done an investigation on this, but, this will be interesting to see what comes of it. So, sure, the next day, I believe, George Lutz, this was in February of 1976, George Lutz, the former owner of the house who had fled the house, called the Parapsychology Institute, which my husband ran, and asked if we could conduct an investigation of his house because there were demons in the house, and he said he couldn't mention their names because if he did, they would appear, and he had all kinds of things happening there, and so my husband said, well, we can send a couple of teams to spend the night, and we'll have to meet you at the house, and you can let us in. And he said, no, I'm not going back to that house. I'll meet you at Zum Zum's restaurant in the Smith Haven Mall, and I'll give you a permission slip that you're allowed to go into the house. So he said, okay, so we set that up, and we were all set to meet him to get the permission, and we assembled two teams. One would go in for the first half of the night, and then the second team would spell them and spend the rest of the night there. But before that happened, another newspaper, the Long Island Press, interviewed my husband, and he said, that we were going to be investigating, And if it's a real phenomena, we'll let the public know. And if it was a hoax or it wasn't true, we would also let them know, because we were a public service organization and we didn't charge for our investigations. So that is how the whole thing happened, of how we were set to go in. And then all of a sudden, a few days later, George Letts calls up and says, well, you spoke to the press. We didn't want any publicity, so we're going to cancel the investigation for now. And Stephen said, well, that's your right. That's fine. It would have been nice if you gave us a little notice, because everybody was, arranging their schedules to do this investigation. And he said, well, we'll get back to you, but we really don't want any publicity, and you spoke to the press, so we're going to cancel it for now. A few days after that, we saw he had a whole team of psychics and mediums and television crew and investigators in the house conducting a seance, and it was on the local news channel that night. And we said, he doesn't want any publicity. What the heck is this? What's going on here? So that's when we first started getting suspicious that this story was not all it was cracked up to be.
Now, this other crew that he brought in, were these people that were known to you as being investigators as well?
Yeah, we were familiar with them. One was from the Psychical Research Foundation in Durham, North Carolina. Another one was from, I forgot the name, but there was a psychic research group in Manhattan that was very well known. And they had people come in from there. Those people, when we interviewed them, they attended it, but they never did a official investigation, and they said that they did not experience anything there, and they did not back up the story. They did not make any conclusions as to what was going on or was not was going on. And the only thing really that the television crew experienced is that somebody felt like their heart was racing, and that was the extent of that. Marvin Scott was the television reporter from Channel 5 at the time in New York, and Marvin Scott, who's still around these days, will tell you that the only thing he really experienced was a lot of watching these people go through all of the circus that was going on with the seance.
If you and your husband had been allowed to go in there with your teams, what kind of techniques and investigation would you have used to investigate this?
Okay, well, back in 1976, they didn't have all these kind of sophisticated equipment like they have now with EPVs and all these meters and things like that. So we basically had psychics. We had people that were experts in making sure that they would debug the house and make sure that there was no phony setup going on to, make things appear during a fake seance. We had photographers. We had an infrared photographer. We had devices to measure heat and cold spots in the house. We had tape recorders, basic equipment at the time that we would record to see if there was any strange sounds, if there, like I said, any cold spots, any visual disturbances, anything like that.
Have you ever been able to go into the house and conduct these investigations?
Into the Amityville Horror House?
Yeah.
We were there about 4 or 5 times, but they were not official visits. We were, however, able to go through the house, and the first time we were invited in by the Cromedy family, which bought the house after the Lutzes, and they experienced no phenomena there. They allowed us to come in because they were very upset that the book had been published and that they were getting all kinds of harassment from the public in this house they had bought. But so they allowed us to go all through the house and check out all the different rooms and show us the rooms that were mentioned in the book, and the infamous red room that was down in the basement, which was merely an access to a pipe well with a closet attached to it, so that there were the kids' board games were stored in there, and somebody had painted the wall red, but it was a tiny little space. I mean, you would have to. My husband used to joke and say you'd have to be Hervé Villechaize on kneecaps to fit in there to have the cult ceremony. But I don't know if anybody who knows who that guy is nowadays, because there was a character named Tattoo on Fantasy Island who was a dwarf person, a little person, as they say. And so he used to joke about that, because really they claimed that all these things were happening in the Red Room, and it wasn't even a room. It was a pipe well. Yeah,
I just saw a movie about the DeFeo family just the other week. And they showed all the DeFeo kids smoking pot in that Red Room. There was like 10 of them in there. And they're friends.
How could they all fit? I mean, how would they all fit in there?
Well, you know what it is?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, someone read the book, and then they made a scene for the movie, and no one actually went to the house. Now, with the they've actually had to change the number in the house, and they've changed the outside, the windows and stuff, because so many people come by and visit.
Yes, and people still manage to find it, especially at Halloween and Friday the 13th and things like that. And back in the 70s, they had people coming from all over the country. They had people coming from overseas, and the radio stations would even sponsor busloads of people going on a ride to see the Amityville Horror House. I mean, it was way out of control. The Cromneys eventually had to leave the house in care of a friend and leave the premises because they couldn't handle the harassment anymore. People would come up into the house and rip pieces of the sod out of the ground, or take a piece of shingle off the house, and or they would come out of the bars at night in Amityville and drive by at 3 a.m. screaming for Jody the Demon Pig to come out. So they had a man named Frank Birch who was watching the house for them, and this was around 1979. He had a Halloween party at the house, and he had the invitations made that said, "For God's sake, come in," which was a parody on the movie promo, which always said, "For God's sake, get out." So we were able to be in the house that time for the Halloween party, and we saw a lot of some of the other things. We had free range of the house, and we were able to check it out at that time, and that's why you always see a picture of my husband and I in Halloween costumes squatting in the Red Room. But they also, when we went with the Cromedies, they showed us that the window that supposedly flew open and slammed down on the Lutz son's hand and broke his hand, and all it's in the story, that window was able to open and close by itself because it was on an old-fashioned pulley system, and if you walked across the floor hard, the vibrations would make the window go up. So it was merely a mechanical thing as far as that's concerned. The supposed slime that was dripping from the walls was taken from when William Weber, the attorney for Ronald DeFeo, who was the mass murderer who killed his entire family, decided to cook up this story with George and Kathy Lutz, that they would write a book. They would claim that all these things happened in the house, and William Weber's angle was to try to get Ronald DeFeo out of prison by saying that he was possessed and the devil made him do it. So they were going to attempt to get a mass murderer free, and then they were going to share the profits from this book. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, that book never came to fruition because the Lutzes turned their back on Weber and went and got a different author to write their book, and that was Prentice Hall was the publisher of the book at the time.
What a tangled web.
Sure. Yeah.
I says, what a tangled web this whole thing is.
Oh, very, very tangled, yes.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What were we going to say?
At the time the book came out, it came out in hardcover version.
Right.
And like when it came out a year or so later by Bantam Books, there was a softcover version. And if you had the original version, the first edition of the hard copy and the soft copy, which we had at the time, and you compared the two, they changed a whole lot of things. And it says right in the book, this is a copy of the original, not one word has been changed. And you go through page by page, there are hundreds of words and things that were changed. For example, the priest that supposedly came and experienced flies all over the house and somebody screaming at him to get out, he was supposedly driving down the road when the hood of his car, which was a Chevy Vega, flew open and smashed his windshield. Only my husband pointed out that we had a Chevy Vega, and the hood opened in the opposite direction. It didn't open towards the windshield. It opened away from the windshield, so that would have been a physical impossibility. So when the paperback came out, they changed it to a tan Ford.
Did anybody go and does this priest exist? Does anybody know if he even exists?
Does the priest exist?
Yeah.
He did exist. I think he's since passed away.
Okay.
There was a priest. He was called to the house and he blessed the house, and that was the extent of his involvement. And he was harassed and dragged into court, and the diocese didn't want anything to do with this case. They wanted to hush the whole thing up. So after it got really bad, they sent him off as a chaplain on a cruise ship for a while, and not many people got to speak to him after that. But I do believe he has since passed away, and when he was still alive, he was not allowed by the diocese to even speak about the case.
Now, when you describe...
When he testified in the court, he did tell the judge that the only thing he did was go there and bless the house.
And what kind of hearing did he testify in?
There was a lawsuit where William Weber was suing the Lutzes for breaking their contract with him for the book that they had planned to write and for using the material that he had helped them gather in the subsequent book, the Amityville Horror that came out from Prentice Hall. So there was a lawsuit in 1979, and it was before 79, because in 79 is when our friend, the radio host Joel Martin, got William Weber on the program, and there's a transcript of that in my book, as I said, where Weber confesses to his involvement in everything that they did to plan this story. So because the lawsuit was going on, the priest was called in, William Weber testified, I'm assuming the Lutzes testified, and it was eventually all settled out of court for an unknown sum. But you can get the transcripts of that trial if you want to purchase that from Suffolk County. They will charge you per page.
Yeah, it's like $1 a page.
Quite long and involved.
now, this scenario you described where Lutz purchased the house and he had a deal with Ronnie DeFeo's attorney, there's a transcript of that too, right?
Well, they may discuss that in that Weber case, that legal case, yes. He supposedly, when he bought the house, he was newly married. His wife had 3 children already, and he was a surveyor on Long Island with the family business, and the surveying business was really going downhill at the time, and so he was not making enough money to really afford that house, and so the theory was that he bought the house, decided that he could not afford it any longer, and decided to cook up this whole story where he would make money off of the book, and then they would be able to get out of debt. But they subsequently had books written. There were so many sequels. I kid you not, one of the sequels was Jody the Demon Pig followed them on the airplane to California, and they looked out the window and saw Jody the Pig on the wing, a la Twilight Zone with William Shatner gremlin on the wing.
Right.
So it just went from bad to worse. And one of the sequels, actually, my husband would point out that on the cover it said a true story, and then when you'd open to the copyright page, it would say this is a work of fiction.
Let's take a little commercial break here, okay?
Sure.
We're with Roxanne Salch Kaplan, and we're talking about her whole life history, about the Amityville Horror, her investigation into the Amityville Horror, which she has concluded is a hoax. Right? You call it the Amityville Horror Conspiracy, but you've concluded it's a hoax, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So we'll be right back after these messages with more of Roxanne Salch Kaplan. And now a word from our sponsors. Check out CartKing.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. From large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee kiosks or coffee stations, coffee carts, CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website, CartKing.com. Please visit today at CartKing.com or just call them at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you and you get a good deal. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subash Technosis by email at info@subashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. We're here today with Roxanne Salch Kaplan, and we're talking about her book, The Amityville Horror Conspiracy, and basically the whole Amityville horror story in general. What made you guys, after, the Lutzes said, hey, we don't want you investigating, what made you stick with this case over all these years?
Well, we pretty much didn't have a choice because the Amityville horror is known the world over. But my husband really stuck to it, trying to tell people the truth, because he really was an old-fashioned guy who grew up on Superman and the American way and honesty and truth and justice. And it sounds corny now, but that's the way he was. And he felt that, people should not be buying a book that says the real true story when the whole thing was made up. And he felt that it cast a really bad light on the field of parapsychology, which he was very serious about. There were people out there, and are people out there, who experience actual phenomena and need somebody honest who's going to come in and try to help them find out what's going on, rather than demonologists or fake investigators that are going to charge them a fortune, come in and say, oh yes, this terrible spirit's here, you have to flee your house. We were involved in one case up in Chambly, up in Canada, and this couple was desperate. They had called in the Warrens because they were experiencing things in their home, and it was a family with 5 children, and they all fled the house because they had Ed and Lorraine Warren come in. And Ed and Lorraine, as soon as they got there, before they even entered the front door, were saying that they felt evil spirits everywhere and that this family needed to flee the house for their lives. And so they were staying at relatives, going from home to home. They were basically homeless and afraid to go back to their house. And they contacted Stephen, and we told them, we'll come up there just for travel expenses, no fee to you, just, buy us, travel fare to get there, and that's it, which we did. And we spent the night in the house, and We had a psychic with us, and he concluded that this was a spirit of the grandfather who had passed in the house, was trying to get in touch with them. And in fact, the psychic felt that there was a book that the grandfather wanted them to read. And sure enough, when they went in the closet and looked all the way in the back of the closet where the psychic said it was, there was this book that was about their family heritage, and that apparently was the book that the grandfather was trying to get them to read. And once they did that, the phenomena stopped, and they were able to move back into their house. Now, this has happened numerous times. That's one example that we knew firsthand because we were there. But they've done this for decades and decades of terrorizing people for profit.
In all your work in this area, have you ever come across an actual documented case where there was a haunting or something like that, or a ghost that actually necessitated, not that part, but that actually necessitated someone having to flee the house? That there was some harm came to a person that they had to flee?
No.
Yeah, right.
No, I haven't.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You know?
And all the years, all the cases we've done, there was one case where the spirit seemed to be slightly malevolent, but the worst thing it was doing was making shoe prints on the wall, or making loud noises that were scaring the children or something like that. But there was nothing where, to that extent, where we would say, all right, this house is condemned, you got to leave.
Right.
So.
Or a house actually killed somebody. The house.
And like I said, the people have to remember with the Amityville horror, the worst thing about this story, and this is another reason my husband stuck with it, that murder case actually happened.
Right.
That was a true story. 6 people were killed in their beds. 4 of them were children, and the youngest was 9 years old. And it was a horrific case. It was like the worst mass murder ever on Long Island at the time. And they took that tragedy and used it to profit. And that was what my husband felt was the worst thing about the whole case, was the disrespect to these murdered family members, that this house became a circus. And if you actually were in the house, it was a beautiful house on the water on Long Island, which, now those houses are probably worth about $1 million, or maybe at least $500,000, some of them over there. But the only reason that people leave that house now, and it's been sold maybe 4 or 5 times, and nobody since the Lutzes has ever experienced a single phenomena in that house. The only thing they have experienced is people harassing them because of the infamous history of the house. People, will stop by and stare. They built a fence around it now. The Amityville Village Police know that if they see somebody slowing down their car or stopping in front of the house, they will tell them to move on. If they park in front of the house, they'll ticket them. The village itself hates the story and wishes that it would all go away, but unfortunately, when you have all those book sequels and movie sequels, this thing is never going away.
Yeah, there's all kind of remakes now. Whatever became of the Lutz family? The Lutz family, where are they now?
The Lutz family, they both passed away since. Kathy passed away first, and then George several years later. So only their children survived, the 3 that were originally Kathy's children, and then they had 2 more daughters after they moved to California. And there's all kinds of infighting in the family because the 2 stepsons and George, the father, did not get along. And when he passed away, he left all the trademark rights for Amityville to the daughters only and cut the sons out of the will. So they're trying to make their own stories, my Amityville story. I was a kid in that house, and they're doing their own thing now because they were very bitter about being cut out of George's will.
It's like there's a curse, There's nothing but tragedy and destruction.
I wouldn't say it's a curse.
Yeah.
I would say that a horrible thing happened there, and the family that had moved in and created the hoax was a very dysfunctional family. We interviewed, at the time, in the 70s, we interviewed Sergeant Pat Camerado, who was mentioned in the book as having come to investigate the cloven hoof prints in the snow of Jody the Demon Pig. And he said the only time he was ever on the property was at the time of the murders. The Lutzes never called. He never was there when the Lutzes were there. He said, but they did do a weird thing where George, when they were living in the house, George came into the police department in Amityville and tried to turn over his gun. He was a former, I believe he was a Marine. He had a service weapon. And he tried to say, please hold this gun for me. I have an impulse to shoot my wife and kids. And they're like, what? And so I think they held it for a while, and then he eventually came and got it back. I'm not sure how that turned out, but they thought that was really odd at the time that someone would come in and say that. It's almost like he was trying to set up a premise that, something was forcing him to think evil thoughts.
Now, is there anyone out there, any organizations, any groups that are still insisting that this is a true story?
Oh, absolutely. There is a whole slew of people on the web. The internet really didn't get started very much before my husband passed away. He passed away in 95.
Right.
But from the time since when people have been able to discuss this online, it's just gone viral. It's just crazy. There are people out there that believe this story to be true so strongly that they will fight you tooth and nail. If you showed them black and white proof that something wasn't true, they would say you made it up. It's almost like a religion to them. And I have been dragged over the coals, and my name and Stephen's name have been, libeled and slandered by these people for years now. And because of free speech, there's nothing I can do, and the law says you can't slander or libel a dead person, so I can't sue for my husband. But they will say horrible untruths about him on Ed and Lorraine Warren's webpage. They do it on a site called the Amityville Truth, which is a chat board type of thing. For years has been, claiming that my husband was only in the case because he was jealous, that he got canceled from his first investigation, and that he didn't have any real degrees, which is totally false. And it's just, it's unbelievable out there. You will find many pages of people arguing with you how this whole thing was real.
Well, I'm sure I'll be contacted by. It's amazing.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, because after you do one of these controversial shows, the other people involved, they all start contacting you. But
yeah, it's never dying. It's the story that never died. I was recently involved in a documentary series that went to DVD that my friend Ryan Katzenbach, who is a independent investigator and a filmmaker, did a DVD series of stories about the murder and then the hoax case, and it's since been condensed, and it was shown on what channel was it? Reels channel. It was shown on the Reels channel, and was multiple reruns of it because it was a very popular show, and I was briefly in that program. But Ryan has also been raked over the coals, and he has even ended up in court trying to sue these people, and they always back down in the end because, how do you really prove something like this? You can't prove it as a positive, and you can't prove it as a negative. What do you do? Produce a demon in court?
Right.
But yeah, he, and also I was involved in a History Channel documentary. That was the first time I actually appeared on a program, was in 2000. As I said, my husband passed in 95, and he was always the on-camera person, and I was the behind-the-scenes person. So I was very nervous, and they convinced me to do this History Channel documentary in 2000, which I did. And my friend Joel Martin, the radio broadcaster, who's very famous on Long Island, he was also involved in that show. And we told our story there, and that has since become available on a DVD that's part of the Amityville Horror set, where you get, I think, a couple of the Amityville movies, and then you get, this other this bonus DVD of the History Channel program telling about the controversy of pro-con, whether it's real or not. So that's out there. If you look online, you can find numerous things on YouTube. It's just viral. It's everywhere. It's not going away anytime soon.
Are there any other organizations like your own that agree with you that it's a hoax?
There were back when. I'm not currently up to date on the organizations that exist now. So I'm sure there are some that would agree with us and some that would disagree. It's been a long time. It's like 40 some odd years that I've been involved in this case. I was very young when the whole thing happened. I was only 23 years old, and I think that's why I'm one of the last people still alive that were there from the beginning. But just to give you like a quick overview of how this spiraled from, it started out as a couple of local newspaper articles, and then the Lutzes gave press conferences, and they added a few more details. Oh, well, we heard loud noises in the house and banging sounds. And then it went to a supplement of the Sunday News where there was an entire article, and they were saying there was slime on the walls. And then, from there, it went to the book. And the book just threw everything but the kitchen sink in there. They had Jody the Demon Pig, the slime dripping off the walls, which, by the way, that idea was inspired by when William Weber showed the Lutzes crime scene photographs. There was black and green fingerprint dust all over the house, and they thought it looked really creepy, and they decided to make that green slime. There was also a time somewhere in the book where it says the slime is oozing through the keyholes, and we were able to show that the keyholes in the doors they were talking about were deadlocks. There was no hole there. It was decorative, so nothing could have oozed through there. Like I said, the window flying up had a perfectly good explanation. The door that supposedly, this heavy wooden door that flew off the hinges when they were fleeing the house, and when you see in the movie the door flies off the hinges, the original door was still there. And when you see those moon-shaped crescent windows in the movie where the glass comes flying out, those had the original panes in them until they were removed. Back when the Cromedies had the house, we examined those windows, and they showed us it was all original putty on each of those panes in the crescent windows. They had never been replaced.
So you conducted all of this investigation during that Halloween party?
No, first it was we were invited by the Cromedies to investigate the house before the Halloween party.
Okay.
Halloween party was maybe like a year after that when the Cromedies had left, and Frank Birch, their friend, was in charge of the house. And so then that was just like probably about the third or fourth time we were in the house, because we were also there during the auction when the Lutz's furniture was being auctioned off. That time I wasn't with my husband. He was there with a couple of other members. And then there was another time when we stopped by shortly after the book had come out, the original Amityville book, and we'd stopped by to talk to the Cromedies about it. And they were out for the day, but their maid, who was also the DeFeo's maid, was there, and she let us in and spoke to us about Ronald being in prison, and we spoke to her all about Ronald DeFeo because she knew him from the time he was a child. Her name was Lynn Nonowitz. She's since passed away as well.
Why was there
there were like 4 to 5 times we were in the house.
Why was there an auction?
The Lutzes, supposedly when they fled the house, they left their belongings, and so they had got a friend to conduct an auction to sell the possessions that were left in the house.
And did they get more than the average auction because people wanted ghost stuff, or did they just get the regular prices? Do you know?
I would assume people were going in there looking for haunted mirrors or something. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, what about the Ronnie DeFeo? What's going on with him? Is he alive today?
He's still alive. He's up in prison in upstate New York, and he's told maybe 18 different versions of the story of what happened. But some of the stories he claims his oldest sister was involved. In some stories he did it alone. In some stories his friends were helping him. He just changes his story on a regular basis. So nobody will really ever know the actual, way this thing went down. But I mentioned my friend Ryan Kassenbach. During the documentary that he was doing, he was able to get a hold of the original police documents from the from Suffolk County, and they were supposed to be redacted, but somebody accidentally gave him the copy that was not redacted, so he was able to read everything there. And there was mention of a second gun that was in those records. And, consequently, over the years, nobody's mentioned anything about a second gun. It's mostly just been he did it all with the rifle. Well, the second gun was mentioned several times in the original documents, and Ryan decided that it was probably thrown into the water off of the dock on the street a block down from the Amityville house. He actually paid his own money to conduct a research. It cost him, I think, $20,000 to dredge the bottom of the inlet there to see if there was any gun, and they actually pulled up the remnant of a gun.
Oh, really?
And yeah, that is, I believe it's part of the documentary, but I'm not sure. He had the 2 DVDs came out, and the third one was yet to come out when the Reels channel took over and did the shortened version of the story. So it may have been mentioned on the Reels channel. I'm not sure. Anyway, he found this gun, and the police were getting wind of this, so they showed up with crime scene vans and everything, and they let them take a picture of the gun remnant, and then they said, we're going to be holding on to this to investigate, and when we're done with our investigation, if it has nothing to do with the murders, you will get the gun back. So he said, okay. Well, that gun disappeared somewhere in the Suffolk County Police Department, and he never got it back, and they acted like the whole thing never happened.
Really? That's interesting.
Yes.
Because, in that movie I just watched, they allude to, like, organized crime connections to the DeFeos. And
yes.
Yeah.
That was true.
That was true.
Yes.
So
that was true. Ronald DeFeo's family was connected to organized crime, as well as the wife, Louise Briganti DeFeo. We had met her father and brother when my husband was giving a lecture years ago. We saw these 2 guys come up to us, and someone said, oh, those are Louise DeFeo's relatives. You better watch out, like they're in the mafia. And so my husband said, I hope they like the lecture. So they came up to us, and they said, we just wanted to thank you so much for respecting our relatives. He said, in this whole mess, the worst thing has been the disrespect and the lies and the stories that have been told about our family. And these were our family members that died, and people don't realize that. And we just wanted to say thank you for that. And my husband, well, that's a relief.
Your husband would have ripped their phone out of the wall, right?
Yeah, right.
All right, let's take another little commercial break. This is great stuff. I really appreciate you doing this for me. Thank you so much. I know you don't do a lot of interviews. Welcome. Roxanne Salch Kaplan, and we're talking about her story, The Amityville Conspiracy. We'll be right back after these messages.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Check out CartKing.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. From large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee kiosks or coffee stations, coffee carts, CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website, CartKing.com. Please visit today at CartKing.com or just call them at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you and you get a good deal.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling, websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subash Technosis by email at info@subashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. We're here today with Roxanne Salch Kaplan. We're talking about her book here, the Amityville Conspiracy. One of the original Ghostbusters from the very start. Let me ask you a question.
That's right.
It's so true. What do you make of these kids today? You see them on TV. They got all these gadgets and gizmos. What do you think of their work?
I wish them all the best. I really don't know anything about the modern gadgets, but if it's helping them in their investigations, that's great. I think, my daughter is actually trying to revive the Parapsychology Institute, and it's just a matter of funding. At this point, it's become very expensive because everybody's using all of this equipment, and we were bare bones back in the 70s. So my daughter Victoria is very interested in continuing her father's legacy, and I would just want to warn people out there to thoroughly investigate before you just believe these people. It doesn't matter if it's been alive for 40 years, if it's been alive for 10 years. A lie is a lie, and you can elaborate it on it for 40 years. It's still going to be a lie. So take everything with a grain of salt. Do your own investigation, and I wish them well.
And you said your daughter wants to follow in your late husband's footsteps. Would she go?
Yes.
Is there a course she can take to get credentials? How would you go about doing that?
No, there's never really been a course where you can get credentials in parapsychology. It always helps to study maybe sociology, anthropology, those type of things. And maybe you can find classes out there about the history of parapsychology. But I don't believe there's any real degree that you can get in parapsychology. I could be wrong.
And what about
they could have had it.
Your personal faith, your personal religion?
My personal religion,
Yeah.
I believe in God, but I'm really not with any organized religion right now.
Okay. All right, so what do you want to leave us with? We only got about a couple of minutes left.
Okay. I would like to say specifically about Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed has passed years ago. Lorraine is still around, and their son-in-law has carried on their legacy of lies and deceit and people fooling people. I would say do your research. You could come to my Facebook page, the Amityville Horror Conspiracy, and ask me any questions you want. We have pictures there. We have a picture of Ed Warren from years ago levitating a Cabbage Patch doll.
Oh.
So that should show you something about his integrity. Annabelle, the doll, the movie, the nun, and all those things that they're now currently making money off of, all phony. They originally had a doll they claimed was haunted, and it was a Raggedy Ann doll. It was not the kind of doll you see in the movie. They had this Raggedy Ann doll in their Museum of Oddities, and it would say, "Do not break glass upon pain of death," or something like that. And that was where that whole idea came from. But if you see something out there and it says it's a true story and it doesn't seem very true to you, it probably isn't.
That's so true. I always tell people to double down your skepticism. If you've been skeptical before, double down. Because
Yes.
when you start to meet these
Absolutely.
people, selling these stories, you start meeting, interview them, you find out that they're not all that cracked up to be. But Roxanne,
Absolutely.
I can't listen. I really had a lot of fun today. And I know you didn't have to come on. You're not promoting anything. You just did me a favor. And I
Right.
really, really appreciate it. And I know
You're very welcome.
And I know you got to run off to a Halloween party, but maybe we can have you come back and we could tell us the whole Eitan Pate story in better detail.
Sure.
And all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much, Roxanne.
You're very welcome. Have a happy Halloween.
You too. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. So then we had Roxanne Salch Kaplan. And the book she wrote, she doesn't get anything from this book anymore, but the book is out there. It's in circulation. You can get used ones or copies and stuff like that. It's called The Amityville Horror Conspiracy. And she has a Facebook page, again, called Amityville Horror Conspiracy. Okay. And I was trying to talk to her off the air to see if, because I read this article one time about these Ghostbusters and the Amityville Horror, and they were suing each other. They had restraining orders, and they tried to run each other over with a car. And I asked if that was her. She said no, but I don't know, man. I gotta find out if her husband's pulling phones out of the wall. He could have been the guy. So maybe we'll get these warrants to come on to and get their side of the story or whatever. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Roxanne Salch Kaplan. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget our members section. We've been hitting them out of the park lately. You got to admit, guys, our members section, you can support the show. I'll give you a deal, 13 months for $65. You email me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can just go to oppermanreport.com. There's a donate button there. You can donate to keep the show on the air. You can become a membership there. You get a monthly membership for $6 or quarterly for $20 or yearly for $74. If you want to advertise on the show, you can contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com. Got a lot of big stuff coming up. We got Stuttering John I'm interviewing this week. I'm also, I tentatively have a appointment to talk with the attorney for this mail bomber that you saw on Anderson Cooper the other night. Turns out he's friends with A.J. Weberman. You know what I mean? How do you hook this? How do you make these connections, man? You gotta, if you want to, I don't know. I knew A.J. Weberman when I was 17 years old, and you meet him, then he knows somebody, puts you in touch with him. How do you make these connections and have this kind of life's history and experiences? But in order to continue this quality level of work, man, we're giving you here, we need some funding to support all this. So we do that by selling memberships. Where you get exclusive content. There's court docs in there. There's videos in there. There's interviews that you won't find anywhere else. We have an interview in there with Maurice Simonet, the Blacks for Trump, Michael the Black Man they call him, who's part of that Yahweh Ben Yahweh cult. And then we just see him now. He's photographed with the mail bomber. So, 6 degrees of Opperman Report. Okay, we're connected to everybody. And in order to continue this work, we need funds. We need either donations, sponsors to advertise on the show. If you have an event coming up, you're selling a book, we'll promote your event and your book signing, or memberships or donations. That's where we are. Okay, I enjoy doing the show. I love doing the show, but financially, I can't carry this weight myself alone. Okay, we did a show the other day that I guess it went over people's heads, but historical guests, historical content, and we just kind of chewed this guy up and blew holes in it. But I guess if you don't put that in the title, then people just don't hear what's going on. So very frustrating. All right, guys. Good night. Thank you.